This is a special bonus episode of Judaism Unbound, Confronting Carbon Pharaohs. Welcome back, everyone. I'm Dan Liebenson.
And I'm Lex Rofberg.
And we are thrilled to release this midweek bonus episode in a different format than usual. In our last core episode, we talked with Madeline Canfield and Nate DeGroot, two of the organizers of a project called the Exodus Alliance. But we thought it would be a big missed opportunity if we didn't also offer an episode featuring the project's founder, Arthur Waskow, who was our guest back on episode 166. Today's bonus episode isn't an interview. Instead, we wanted to give Arthur Waskow the chance to speak from the heart about his creation of the Freedom Seder over 50 years ago and the work he continues to do today, connecting the observance of Passover to working against the threat of climate catastrophe. We hope that listening to his prophetic words will inspire you as you gear up for this coming Passover, and as we all seek to channel Jewish holiday observance toward the creation of a better, more just world. So without further ado, we'll pass the mic to the founder of the Freedom Seder and the director of the Shalom Center, Arthur Waskow.
Shalom Aleichem. We're in the period between Purim and Pesach. My theory has been that Purim was an attempt to limit kings and tyrants by making fun of them. But if that didn't work, then we would have to do Pesach and invoke all the energy of the breath of life, the wind of change, even a hurricane of transformation. So that's where we are, and we're looking toward Pesach. I think I'd like to begin just by saying the bracha for Torah study, though I wish there were a whole group of people we could study Torah together with. But even if I'm just alone in talking, you'll be a group of people listening. So, Baruch atah Yah Eloheinu Ruach Haolam Asher Kichanu b'mitzvot v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. And I'll say amen to myself. Thinking about Pesach and what we're doing this year that's different brings me back really to the beginning of my Jewish life, and certainly to the beginning of my becoming Yisrael, wrestling with God 53 years ago now. 1968, Martin Luther King was murdered, which moved me deeply. I had met him once, and the whole movement to transform America to be a fuller democracy had engaged me, moved me. Not especially Jewishly. There was only one piece of Jewish practice that I was really passionate about, and that was the Passover Seder. It was about freedom and justice. And I grew up in a household where those were important, and the Seder was therefore important. Well, it turned out that Dr. King being murdered came just a week before Passover in 1968. And that week, the President of the United States, Lyndon Johnson, responded to an uprising from the Black community in anger, fury, and frustration by sending the U.S. Army into Washington to occupy the city. And he proclaimed a curfew, which in theory applied to everybody, but the police didn't care if whites were on the streets. So they mobilized to close down the Black neighborhoods. And a bunch of us, whites, civil rights, and anti-war activists, created what we called a Center for Emergency Support to get food and medicine, lawyers and doctors into the Black community, which otherwise was totally cut off by the curfew. So that's what I was doing for a week, day and night. But then came the first night of Passover. So I walked home to get ready to do the Seder. That meant walking past the army. And when I got to the block I lived on, it meant walking past the Jeep with a machine gun aimed at the block I lived on. My kishkis, my innards, my guts, more than my brain, began to say, "This is Pharaoh's army, and you're going home to celebrate liberation from Pharaoh." And that moment changed my life. It changed the Seder, which became for me a kind of volcano in my backyard that I hadn't even known existed. I'd always been serious about it, but the line which is in every traditional Haggadah, in every generation, every human being, it says Kol Adam, not every Jew, every human being should look upon himself, herself, as if we go forth from slavery to freedom, not our great, 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 great grandparents only. I'd read that line ever since I was old enough to read, but it hadn't meant very much. But that night, it meant everything, really. It meant the streets were in the Seder and the Seder was in the streets. So I found myself later that year called, really, it felt like a call to write what became the Freedom Seder, to connect the ancient liberation struggle of the Jewish people with the modern liberation struggle, ongoing still then, still now, of Black America and of other communities struggling for freedom. I learned what a midrash was, and that what I was doing was midrash, that I was taking an ancient text, not only the Haggadah for Passover, but ancient biblical texts, and transforming them, reading them with new eyes. And that was midrash, and I could do it. And it was traditional to do it, but it had mostly gotten frozen several centuries ago. So that brings me to now. Here we are, we're facing the greatest, deepest, most urgent crisis in the history of the human race. The crisis of whether large parts of the web of life that we have lived with as a species since our beginnings are going to survive, whether even the human species is going to survive the climate crisis that human beings have invented. We have choked the breathing of the earth. The breathing of the earth depends on the exchange of oxygen and CO2 between plants and animals, back and forth. We animals breathe in oxygen and breathe out CO2. The plants of the earth breathe in the CO2, use it to build themselves, and then breathe out oxygen. But part of the human race, I call them corporate carbon pharaohs, big oil, gas, coal corporations, burn fossil fuels so profusely that we send so much CO2 into the atmosphere that not all the trees and bushes and plants and grasses of planet Earth can turn them back into oxygen, which means they build up and build up and build up, and they're heat trapping gases. People call them greenhouses, but that's a nice name. They trap heat, and the planet is getting hotter and hotter. And the result of getting hotter and hotter are plagues of fire, plagues of flood, plagues of famine, where the food crops fail. The reason I call them corporate carbon pharaohs is that they behave like Pharaoh. for their own power and their own wealth and their own enormous hyper wealth, they're prepared to burn up the earth. And just as Pharaoh's stubbornness and arrogance and cruelty was prepared to burn up his own country. So that's what a Pharaoh is. The Pharaoh thought he was God. He didn't realize that enslaving human beings would mean that the earth itself would rise up against them. That's what the plagues were. So here we are at a moment of deep crisis. And the US government, which is one of the most important to act on this, because the US has the per capita, the highest, and per nation, one of the 2 or 3 highest emissions of CO2 into the atmosphere. So what the US government does is really important. But the US government is paralyzed. Why is it paralyzed? Because the corporate carbon pharaohs have enough power to make a deadlock. The first half of that word, deadlock, was more important even than the second half, the locked part. We're locked into death by this paralysis until and unless the people of the United States can change their government. A majority of them, a big majority, are committed to deal with the climate crisis. They know it exists. They don't think it's a fake, but they have not been able yet to make the political majority. There's a popular majority, a majority of the people, but there are elements of the Constitution that were deliberately set up to prevent a simple democratic majority of the people from making decisions. Systematic breaks against democratic decision making. So some of us decided that there needs to be another way to mobilize what Moses and Aaron and Miriam mobilized, maybe Shiphrah and Puah, the midwives who refused to obey Pharaoh's order to murder every Israelite baby boy. And what we need is a movement. We don't need a single family like Moses, Aaron, and Miriam. We need a much broader movement. And we need, since what's making the pharaohs possible is, at this point, money they have to borrow from big banks like Chase Bank and from big pools of money set up to make investments. Some of them are making investments in burning the earth, our home, the only home we have. They're investing in arson, to tell the truth, investing in murder as well as arson. So 6 months ago, more even, maybe, I looked ahead to see when the major festivals like Passover were going to be. And it turned out, to my surprise and interest, that Passover, the Christian Holy Week, and Ramadan, the sacred month-long daytime fast with breaking of the fast each evening, is also in April, as it turned out, both Passover, Pesach, and Holy Week were. And then I thought, hey, maybe we can bring together the religions for which the Exodus is important. A big hunk, maybe a fourth or a fifth of the Quran is about the Exodus. So at least those 3 religious traditions could perhaps work together to deal with this threat to human life, to the life of every species on the planet, to the planet itself. So thinking about it, I decided to write Bill McKibben, who was a co-organizer of 350.org, an international worldwide effort to stop the climate scorching of the planet. It's not global warming. Warming is nice. It's global scorching. To stop that, so as to save the planet, to write Bill McKibben and see what he thought about the notion of focusing these April dates. There were a couple more that are not official religious dates. One of them is April 4th, the yahrzeit, the death anniversary of Dr. Martin Luther King. So I got a letter back, just 2 lines from Bill McKibben saying, "That's very smart. Is it okay with you if I get in touch with Green Faith?" Now, Green Faith is a global interfaith organization about the climate crisis. I wrote back saying, "Sure." Green Faith said, "Hey, that's a great idea. And besides that, there are festivals of the Hindu community, the Buddhist community, and other communities in mid and late March and early May." So I came back to the question about Passover. Glad that there was going to be a global religious response. So our national organizer, Nate DeGroot, and I, and other staff, and some of the board of the Shalom Center, created by initiating and organizing a broader group called Exodus Alliance. Exodus Alliance, one word, .org. There's a whole complex of things. There are resources, information about the banks and other pools of money that invest in burning earth. So the hope is that we will have dozens of clusters of Jews, Christians, Muslims, maybe others as well, gather at Chase banks all over the United States. Chase Bank is practically ubiquitous, practically everywhere. There may be other places, BlackRock, that also make major investments in burning the earth. And the hope is that on the 3 intermediate days of Passover, not all of them, but one of them, that people appear at the doorways of those banks and do the new Freedom Seder, the Earth and Justice Freedom Seder, or a stripped down version of it if it feels too long. We're imagining people coming in costume as Pharaoh, as Mother Earth, as the golden calf, which gets connected with what it means to be freed at Sinai. So the idea is for people everywhere to demand that Chase Bank and other big pools of money that are being invested in death and fire, that they stop. And they not only stop, they move their money, protect our planet, and prosper our people. Move the money to where it serves life, not death. So that, I think, is where I want to end. I hope many of you will help to organize and take part in the exodus from plagues that plague not only human beings, but all of Earth, that threaten the destruction of the web of life on Earth. It will take many human beings to defeat and to change the carbon pharaohs so that they undertake a commitment to life. All of us can be the movement to make that happen. I welcome you to it. Shalom Aleichem. Again, Aleichem Shalom. And let us make a true Shalom. It's not just peace, but wholeness, harmony among Adamah, earth, and us human earthlings is what we really are. Adam and Adamah. We fit into each other. It's time for us to make that fit peaceful, harmonious, and whole.
Thank you so much, Arthur Waskow, for blessing us with your words of Torah in this bonus episode. We're so grateful to you. We're so grateful to the Exodus Alliance that you founded and that is doing just inspiring work. We wanted to close this episode not like we normally do by encouraging you to send us a note at Judaism Unbound, but instead by encouraging you to participate in the work of the Exodus Alliance. You can learn more about this amazing project by going to exodusalliance.org, and we encourage you to do so. There's events happening all around the country, and if you don't see one that's near you, it might not be too late to organize one in your neck of the woods and try to recruit some friends to come as well. So definitely, if you were touched by Arthur Waskow's beautiful words in this bonus episode, you'll want to learn more at exodusalliance.org. So thank you so much for listening, and with that, this has been Judaism Unbound.